Hi everyone! Today we are working on the classic handbag. It has a classic look and can be used for any season or occasion. On the front, you can show your favorite fabric, or you can make a practical zipper pocket that you can quilt as an extra detail or just leave plain. Instructions for both are included in the pattern, which you can get at sewnideas.com. The two top zippers both open to the main compartment. Inside the main compartment are two pleated slip pockets on one side and a zipper pocket on the other. For this video, I chose cotton fabric for the inside instead of waterproof canvas. This is so that you can better see the difference between the right and wrong side of the fabric. It can be hard to see on waterproof canvas. I hope you liked the video and enjoy making this classic handbag. Start by printing out your pattern pieces at 100%. On pattern piece number 1 is a 1 inch and a 4 centimeter test square. You need to measure the test squares and ensure that they are exactly 1 inch or 4 centimeters in size. Pattern piece number 1 needs to be taped together. Start by cutting along this line. Place the pattern piece you just cut on top of the other pattern piece. Line up the lines in the middle, at the top and bottom, then tape together. Now cut all the way around your pattern piece. Repeat this process for pattern piece number 2. For pattern piece number 3, the Peltex bottom, you need to add some markings. To do this, cut some small slits along the broken line on the paper pattern piece. You will also need to do this for the purse feet location. Place it on top and then use a pencil to trace the markings onto the smooth side of the Peltex piece. This will ensure that you have all the markings you're going to use later. You will also need to print out page number 5, the cutting list. At the top of the page is a key for all of the abbreviations used. On this page, you can see what it is you're going to cut out, which pattern pieces and the measurements, and in what fabric it is going to be cut out in. Cut out each of the long boxes at the scissors markings. Now you can use the boxes as cutting labels so that you can attach them to the fabric as you cut it. Before you start cutting out the fabric, you need to decide if you want a zipper pocket on the front of the bag. If you don't, then throw out that cutting label. If you are making the zipper pocket, choose the cutting for quiltlet or not quiltlet zipper pocket. For this video, I am going to quilt my zipper pocket, so I am taking the cutting label with the text "to be quiltlet." I am not going to use the cutting label for not quiltlet, so I am just going to throw that one out. So you can see on the cutting labels what it is, the measurements to cut, and what it needs to be cut in. So now you are ready to cut everything out. Please note on pattern piece number 1, the main body, there is an arrow with the word grain. That line needs to be cut parallel to the grain of your fabric. So for example, if you have 12 inches or 30.5 centimeters from the grain of your fabric to the arrow at the top, you also need to have it at the bottom. Now you can cut out the rest of your fabric using the measurements on the cutting labels. When you have cut out all of your fabrics and have attached interfacings, here is what you should have. Main body pieces. 2 in outer fabric with featherweight interfacing and 1 piece of Decoville heavy or 2 pieces of Decoville light. and 2 pieces in lining fabric. I used cotton fabric for my lining pieces, which I interfaced for this video, so it will be easier for you to see the right and wrong sides. I am going to show you where on the bag the different pieces are going to be. This is the bag I made in the pattern. As you can see, I used different colors of fabric for all the different pieces, so it would be easier for you to follow along. The main body and outer fabric is the light purple and the brown fabric. The quilted pocket. You should have one in quilting cotton and one in flex foam. The dark purple is the quilted zipper pocket. Lining for the quilted pocket is the yellow fabric on the sample bag. You should have one in lining fabric. This is the top band. You should have one in faux leather. This is the narrow top zipper panel. It is the pink ones on each side. You should have 2 in outer fabric that is interfaced and 2 in lining fabric. The wide top zipper panel. You should have 1 in outer fabric that is interfaced and 1 in lining fabric. This is the red one in the sample bag. The bottom panel, which is the black one in my sample bag. You should have 1 in faux leather and 1 in lining fabric. Also the bottom stabilizer, which is the piece in Peltex that was marked earlier. The piping is optional, but adds a little detail. The piping is going around the main body pieces. You should have the pleated pocket with interfacing. It is the orange pocket in the sample bag. The inside zipper pocket, which can be accessed from the other side. This is the inside pocket. You should have 1 in outer fabric with interfacing. And the zipper strap, you cannot see that here. You should have 1 in waterproof canvas. Then you should have 2 pieces of binding. Cut after the measurements using the cutting labels. Inside, there is also a removable bottom, which is to make the bottom sturdy and prevent the bag from sagging. It is optional, but I would recommend to make it. However, you are not going to cut that before you have assembled the bag. You are also going to need some webbing. I am using nylon webbing, which is for the handle. Then you are going to need some boning. The boning is going to stabilize the top. It is going to go on either side of the handle, here and here. Now that you have everything you need, let's get started. Take the outer zipper pocket that needs to be quilted. If you don't want your zipper pocket to be quilted, just skip this step. You need to draw a 45-degree line onto your fabric, which will be the starting line. I use an old bar of soap, but you can also use tailor's chalk. Now place your fabric on top of your foam. You will be sewing through the fabric and the foam on the line you just drew. After sewing the first line, use a piece of cardstock as a template and place the cardstock next to the line just sewn. Now sew the next line and keep doing this until all the lines are sewn. Then draw another line at a 45-degree angle on the short end. Sew on that line and repeat moving the cardstock until you are finished with quilting the pocket. Now you need to draw a line along the top and bottom edges so you have 5¼ inch or 13½ centimeters between the lines. Now sew along the lines you just drew at the top and bottom. Cut beside the stitchings you just did, being careful not to cut into them. I find it easier to turn it onto the back so I can see more clearly. Place the lining for the zipper pocket right side facing up. Place your zipper on top with zipper teeth facing up and line up the long edge of the lining fabric with the long edge of the zipper tape. Now take your zipper pocket, quilted or not, and place it on top of your zipper with right side facing down and line up the long edges. Pin in place. Now you are going to sew along the pinned edge using a 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance. When you come to the zipper pulls, just move them out of the way. Turn the pocket so wrong sides are together and press the top edge. Move the zipper pulls towards the middle. Top stitch the top edge using a 1/8 inch or 3 millimeter seam allowance. If you did not quilt the fabric for your zipper pocket, then all your edges should line up perfectly. If you did quilt your zipper pocket, you will trim the edges later. Now base stitch the pocket pieces together, starting just under the zipper, then the bottom, and then up along the other side, stopping just before the zipper teeth. Take one of the main body pieces in outer fabric, right side facing up. Now take the zipper pocket, quilted or not, and line up the bottom edges and center it. The zipper pocket should extend the main body piece at both sides. Pin the bottom edges in place. Make sure the zipper pulls are towards the middle. Turn it to the other side so wrong sides are facing up and pin each side. Then sew the top edge of the zipper tape using a 1/8 inch or 3 millimeter seam allowance. Then turn it to the other side and sew the pocket in place around the main body using a 1/8 inch or 3 millimeter seam allowance. Now your zipper pocket is attached. Take the top band and turn it so wrong side is facing up. You are going to make a horizontal center line. Place a piece of double-sided tape onto the line you just drew. Remove the paper backing and fold each long edge towards the center line. Place another piece of double-sided tape onto the middle where the seams meet. Remove the paper backing from the tape. Place the top band onto the top edge of the zipper tape. Finger press it into place. Open and close the zipper to check that the top band does not touch the zipper. Adjust the top band if necessary. Then you will sew each of the long edges of the top band using a 1/8 inch or 3 millimeter seam allowance. Now that the top band is attached, you can go ahead and add a bag label or bling to your bag if you would like. Turn so that the wrong side is facing up and trim around your edges. Place the pleated pocket with the right side facing up and fold it in half crosswise. Pin around all the edges, but leave about 4 inches or 10 centimeters opening at the bottom. Sew around the raw edges using a 1/4 inch or 7 millimeter seam allowance, still leaving the opening. Cut off corners diagonally, being careful not to cut through any of your stitches. Turn right side out through the opening. Then carefully poke out the corners. Fold the seam allowance in at the bottom and press the pocket. Top stitch the folded edge using a 1/4 inch or 7 millimeter seam allowance. Place the pocket with the side you want to be facing out. Then measure and mark a vertical center line. Now measure and mark 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters on each side of the vertical center line to make 2 more lines. Fold the line to the right of the center line, aligning the top and bottom edges. Then press the folded edge. You're going to do the same with the line to the left of the center line. Again, lining up the top and bottom edges and press the folded edge. Fold one of the pressed edges back and top stitch along the pressed edge using a 1/8 inch or 3 millimeter seam allowance. After that, you are going to do the same with the other pressed edge. Fold each of the small pleats towards the center line and press. This is how it will look from the front, and this is how it will look from the back. Take one of your main body pieces and lining fabric, with the right side facing up. Draw a line 3/4 of an inch or 2 centimeters up from the bottom edge. Place the pleated pocket centered and onto the drawn line. Pin the pocket in place. Open up the pleats and sew onto the center line. Now that the center line is sewn, you are going to sew around the edges using a 1/8 inch or 3 millimeter seam allowance, leaving the top edge open. Open the pleats and measure 3/4 of an inch or 2 centimeters down from the top folded edge, then mark or put a pin in it. Then you are going to sew from where the fold is at the top down to the mark or pin, and then up to where the fold is at the top on the other side. It will look like a V. Remove pins and erase the center line you drew earlier. Because I used an old bar of soap, I just use a fabric scrap to erase my line. Give it a press and your pleated pocket is finished. Take your zipper strap where you have drawn your markings using the measurements in the pattern. Lay the last main body piece and lining fabric with right side facing up. Measure and mark a line that is 7 3/4 of an inch or 19.5 centimeters up from the bottom edge. Place the top edge of the zipper strap centered onto the line and pin in place. Sew the drawn rectangle. Cut at the drawn center line and the small triangles. Erase the line drawn earlier. Pull the zipper strap through the window. Finger press the edges as you put them through and pin it. Then press it. This is how it would look from the front and from the back. Take your inside zipper pocket and place it right side facing up. Place your zipper at the bottom. Line up the bottom of the zipper tape with the bottom edge of your zipper pocket and pin in place. Base stitch the zipper in place using a 1/8 inch or 3 mm seam allowance, either by hand or machine using big stitches. I will do it by hand quickly. Take the main body piece you made earlier and place the window over the zipper. Line up the short edges of the zipper strap with the zipper pocket. Pin in place. Now sew at the bottom of the window using a 1/8 inch or 3 mm seam allowance. Remove the pins and close the zipper. Turn it to the other side and remove basting stitches. Then turn it over again. Now you will sew over the zipper at each side. Lift the fabric and sew either by hand or by machine over the zipper to close it. Turn it to the other side so wrong side is facing up. Fold the zipper pocket down and press the edge. Now fold the bottom edge of the zipper pocket up to the top edge of the zipper strap. Turn it so the right side is facing up while holding it in place. Pin or hand baste in place. Sew the short edge, continue at the long edge, and then down at the last short edge, using a 1/8 inch or 3 mm seam allowance. Remove pins or basting stitches. Fold the top down and sew close along the edge. Fold right side over and sew the side. Sew a couple of times over the zipper. Repeat for the left side. Trim the edges at both sides. I also like to trim the top edge where the zipper is in between. Press the piece and your zipper pocket is finished. Here is how it looks like on the wrong side, and as you can see, there is no visible or raw edges of the zipper tape. Now you will prepare the zipper by cutting it to the size you need. Measure and mark it at 21¼ inches or 54 centimeters in length. Cut at the mark. You can quickly burn the zipper ends to stop it from fraying. Please be careful not to burn yourself and use caution when handling a lighter. Close each ends of the zipper either by hand or machine to hold the zipper closed. Repeat this for the other zipper so you have 2 zippers. Now you are going to make the top zipper panel. It is where the zippers are on either side of the wide zipper panel and you have a narrow panel on either side of the zippers. Just to visualize where it is, the wide zipper panel is the red fabric here, and the narrow panel is the pink fabric on each side. So this is the top zipper panel you are going to make. Take your wide top zipper panel in outer fabric and place it right side facing up. Now place one of the zippers you just prepared and place it with the zipper teeth facing down. Line up the long edge of the zipper tape with the long edge of the zipper panel. Pin it in place. You will repeat this for the other long edge of the zipper panel. Base stitch both of the long edges using a 1/8 inch or 3 mm seam allowance, either by hand or machine using big stitches. Place the wide top zipper panel in lining fabric, right side facing down. Right sides should be together so you have the zippers between the fabrics. Line up all edges and pin in place. Sew along the long edges using a 3/8 inch or 1 cm seam allowance. While you are at the sewing machine, you will also sew one of the short edges using a 1/8 inch or 3 mm seam allowance, but only sew between the zippers. Now you will turn right side out. Start by sliding the fabric in with your fingers at the short sewn edge. Then I use the handle of a broomstick and press it all the way through. Now you need to open the short edge. Just use your seam ripper. Press the panel, then you are going to top stitch each of the long edges using a 1/8 inch or 3 mm seam allowance. Take the narrow top zipper panels in lining fabric with right side facing up. Place the wide panel on top with zipper teeth facing up. Line up the long edge of the zipper tape with the long edge of the narrow panel. The short edges should also line up. Pin in place. Sew the zippers in place along the long edges using a 1/8 inch or 3 mm seam allowance. This is how it looks now. Place the narrow top zipper panel in outer fabric with the right side facing down along the long edge of the zipper tape. Pin in place. Sew each of the long edges using a 3/8 inch or 1 cm seam allowance. This is how it looks from the front and from the back. Fold the narrow panels so wrong sides are together and pin in place. Top stitch each of the long folded edges using a 1/8 inch or 3 mm seam allowance. Then you are going to sew all the way around all the edges, again using a 1/8 inch or 3 mm seam allowance. Now you will cut the handle to size. Cut webbing to 24.5 inches or 62 centimeters in length. If you are using nylon webbing, you can quickly burn the edges to stop them from fraying. Now to make some markings. You are going to be measuring from the left towards the right. First, measure and mark 4 inches or 10 centimeters and then draw a vertical line. Now measure 4 3/4 of an inch or 12 centimeters and draw a line. Now measure and mark 8 1/4 inch or 21 centimeters and draw a line. And now repeat this from the other side. Take your panel piece and place it right side up, zipper teeth facing up. Center the webbing on the wide top zipper panel and pin the short edge in place. Pin the webbing up to the first marking. Slide your D-ring or triangle ring onto the webbing so it is between the next two markings. Make sure it is still centered and pin up to the last marking. Now slide the other D-ring or triangle ring onto the webbing at the other side. Line up and center the short edges, then pin in place. Pin it up to the first marking. Now slide the D-ring or triangle ring down so it is between the next two markings. Make sure everything is still centered and pin in place. Now you will sew it in place along the edge using a 1/8 inch or 3 mm seam allowance, starting at the short edge, then up to the first marking, and then down again. Then slide the ring down, and then you will sew around here. Then you will do the same to the other side. Here's what it looks like with the handle attached. Now you can erase your markings on the webbing. Once again, I am using a fabric scrap because I used an old bar of soap for my markings. Now you can attach rivets if you want. I am just eyeballing it when I make my markings for this. I will place my rivets on each side of the D-ring or triangle ring and then just before where the handle begins. I do this on each side. Now with the rivets attached, this is how it looks. Now you need to give this some shape and stability. You do this with boning. Cut 2 pieces of boning, each 19 5/8 of an inch or 50 centimeters in length. You need to unpick a couple of stitches just here and here so you can get the boning in. If you use quilting cotton like I do, you can put a pin in so it doesn't slide to the other side. Then just slide the boning through. You need to get the ends in, but you don't want it to be all the way down to the other end. You need it to be out of the seams so you don't sew over it because your needle will break. As you can see, when you have put in the boning, it has more shape and stability. Now take your bottom panel in outer fabric or faux leather and also your bottom stabilizer. Turn the bottom panel so the wrong side is facing up and make some middle marks. I am marking so I know where to place the bottom stabilizer. Also mark the middle of the bottom stabilizer. You should have already transferred the markings to the bottom stabilizer's soft side. If you haven't, you should do this now. Turn the stabilizer so the rough, bumpy side is facing up. Place 2 pieces of double-sided tape about 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter down from the long edges. Remove paper backing from the tape, then center the stabilizer on the bottom panel. Then firmly press it in place with your fingers. Now you will sew around all the edges using a 1/8 inch or 3 mm seam allowance. After that, you are going to sew onto the markings here. Go ahead and make holes for the purse feet location. Then put the purse feet in. Here I am just taking some painter's tape and putting them over the prongs to protect the lining fabric. Now take the bottom panel and lining fabric. Also take the top zipper panel. You are going to attach the bottom panels to the top zipper panel. Place the bottom panel and lining fabric right side facing up. Now lay the top zipper panel on top with zipper teeth and handle facing up. Line up the short edge. The width should be the same. If they are not, you need to trim now. Take the bottom panel in outer fabric or faux leather and place it with the right side facing down. Line up the short edges. Now you should have lining fabric with the right side facing up, then the zipper panel with handle and zipper teeth facing up, and the outer bottom panel with the right side facing down. Line up the short edges and pin in place. Be sure you don't have the boning in your seam allowance because your needle will break. Sew the short pinned edges together using a 1/4 inch or 7 mm seam allowance. Turn it so you have the bottom panels wrong sides together. Top stitch the short edge using a 1/4 inch or 7 mm seam allowance. Now that this side is top stitched, you are going to do the same to the other end. Place the zipper panel so the zipper teeth are facing against the right side of the outer bottom panel. Now take the bottom panel and lining fabric and place it right side down so the right side of the lining fabric of the zipper panel is together with the right side of the bottom panel and lining fabric. Now it is going to bend like this, but it is okay, just let it. Line up the short edges and pin in place. Again, making sure you don't have any boning in the seam allowance. Sew the short pinned edges together using a 1/4 inch or 7 mm seam allowance. Turn it to the other side so bottom panels are wrong sides together. Now top stitch the other short edge just like you did before using a 1/4 inch or 7 mm seam allowance. The zipper panel and bottom panels should still have the same width at each ends. If they don't, you can trim it now. Pin the long sides of the bottom panels and outer and lining fabrics wrong sides together. Sew each of the long pinned edges together using a 1/8 inch or 3 mm seam allowance. Take the main body piece in outer fabric, with or without the zipper pocket, and take the lining piece with the pleated pocket. Place them wrong sides together. Pin them together all the way around. Now take the last two main body pieces and again place them wrong sides together. Pin all the way around. Here is what it looks like. Now you are going to sew around the edges on both of them using a 1/8 inch or 3 mm seam allowance. Take the small fabric piece. The measurement for this is in step 1 on page 24 in the pattern. This is for the piping, so if you don't want the piping, just skip this step. For the small fabric piece, you should have the long ends folded towards the middle. Place it at the middle of the bottom onto the right side of the outer fabric and line up one of the short ends of the small fabric piece to the raw edge of the main body piece. Pin it in place. Repeat this for the last main body piece. Sew them in place using a 1/8 inch or 3 millimeter seam allowance. Now you are going to attach the piping. Start by making a clean cut at the start of the piping. Line up the start of the piping with the middle of the little piece of fabric. Line up the raw edge of the piping with the raw edge of the main body piece, all the way around, and pin in place. When coming to the corners, you can cut a 1/8 inch or 3 millimeter small slits at the raw edge of the piping to help the piping curve better. When you come back to where you started, cut the excess piping off so the piping ends meet in the middle of the small fabric piece. Repeat this process with the last main body piece. Now fold the small fabric piece down and pin in place. Sew all the way around using a 1/8 inch or 3 millimeter seam allowance. Repeat this for the last main body piece. Trim the excess off of the little fabric piece on both main body pieces. Now you are going to trace the quarter markings. Place pattern piece number 1 on top of the main body piece. You can also pin your markings if you are worried the marking will disappear. Repeat this for the other main body piece. You also need to make quarter markings onto the finished zipper/bottom panel made earlier. Fold it where the zipper panel and bottom panel seams are. Line up the seams and pin each side. Now make a mark at the middle of the bottom panel onto each side. This is the middle markings. Also do this for the middle at the top, again onto both sides, and again this is the middle markings. Remove any pins or clips, then line up the middle marking at the bottom and the middle marking at the top, then pin in place. Now fold it and mark it where it makes a crease. Do this at both sides. Remove any pins or clips, and now you have your quarter markings. You should have markings at the top and bottom and each side, and also this on the other side. Now turn the zipper/bottom panel so the lining is facing out. Place the main body piece and outer fabric onto the zipper/bottom panel by lining up the quarter markings. Remember, if you have a design pattern on your fabric, to line it up correctly. I like to put in a pin at the center marking and then a pin on either side of that. I do this with all the markings. When you come to the bottom corners, which will be a tight fit to avoid wrinkles, clip a 1/8 inch or 3 millimeter small slits in the bottom panel to help it curve better. Also do this at the other side. Now you're going to sew all the way around using a 1/4 inch or 7 millimeter seam allowance. The way I like to do this, I place the main body piece facing down against my sewing machine. I think it is easier this way. You can open the zipper to make it easier to sew. Before you attach the binding, you can trim the edges a little if you think they are too bulky. I am just trimming mine just a little bit. If you attached piping, there's going to be a little extra bulk where you started. To avoid this, start your binding either a little bit before or after. Start pinning the binding in place using a lot of clips or pins to help it stay in place. When you come back around to the start, cut the binding about a ½ inch or a little over 1 centimeter. Then overlap at the initial start of the binding. Now sew all the way around to attach the binding using a 1/4 inch or 7mm seam allowance. Again, I like to have the main body piece facing down against my sewing machine. You can open the zipper, making it easier to push it out of the way. Now check to see if you caught the binding on both sides. If you didn't, you can just unpick that area and then sew it again. Now take the last main body piece, minus where I have the zipper pocket and lining fabric, and line it up with the 1/4 markings of the main body piece with the 1/4 markings of the zipper/bottom panel, and pin in place. Again, you can cut small slits in the bottom panel at the bottom corners to make it easier to curve. Now sew together using a 1/4 inch or 7mm seam allowance. Again, I like to have the main body piece laying down against my sewing machine to make it easier. Also open the second top zipper to make it easier to keep it out of the way. Now you can turn it to the other side to check to see how it looks, and make any adjustments if you need to. Turn it back to the other side again. If you need to trim any of your seam allowance, you can do this now. Attach the binding just as you did before. Then sew the binding in place using a 1/4 inch or 7mm seam allowance. Again, remember to check to see if you caught all of your binding. If not, you can adjust it now. Turn right side out and carefully poke out your corners. You can also finger press the edges to get some nice clean folds. On the bottom panel where faux leather is used, you can place a piece of flex foam on the top edge and hammer the edge to get a cleaner look. The bag is nearly finished. You only need a couple more steps before it is completely done. You need to make the adjustable strap and also the removable sturdy bottom that will prevent the bottom of the bag from sagging. For the removable bottom, you can use a piece of corrugated plastic or you can use foam board. Measure the length and width of the bottom of your bag and cut one piece in corrugated plastic or other thin, sturdy material in that measurement. Then place the cut material inside your bag at the bottom to see if it fits. If you think it is a little bit too big, just trim it. Then take the fabric pieces you cut for the sturdy bottom, measurements to cut the fabric are in the pattern, and place the fabrics right sides together. Then pin around 3 of the edges, leaving one of the short edges open for turning later. Sew around the pinned edges using a 1/4 inch or 7mm seam allowance, leaving the short edge open. Cut the 2 corners diagonally where it is sewn. Turn right side out and carefully poke out your corners. Give it a good press, then put the corrugated plastic or your sturdy material inside the sleeve all the way down to the short sewn edge. Fold the ends in and pin in place, then hand sew the edge. Now once you have sewn the edge, you are just putting it inside your bag to prevent the bottom from sagging. Your bag is finished. You just need to make the adjustable strap. The pattern tells you how much webbing you should use in total, and since you've already used some for your handle, take the rest to use for your strap. I am making my straps short so that you will be able to see the entire strap. If you are using nylon webbing, you can quickly burn the ends of the straps to keep them from fraying. Now thread the slider through the webbing and over the center bar. Take the short edge of the webbing and fold it back, then pin in place. Now you can either sew a square or an X into it to keep it in place. Or if you would like to install a rivet, you can sew a square and install one in place. This is how it looks at this point. Lay your strap so the short, raw sewn end is on the back. Then slide on a swivel clasp. Turn it to the other side so you have the short, raw sewn end facing up. Then slide the empty end of the webbing through the slider and through the other side. Now you have created a loop where you have the short, raw end inside between the layers. Now take the last swivel clasp and put the webbing through, then fold the short edge to the back and pin it in place. So this is how it will look from the front and the back. Now you will do as you did before. You can sew a square or an X in it, or you can sew a square and install a rivet. This is how the finished strap will look, but of course yours will be longer. Now you can easily adjust your strap to make it shorter or longer as needed. Now all you have to do is attach your strap and your classic handbag is done. You're finished. I hope you've enjoyed this video and sewing along with me. If you haven't already, you can purchase this pattern at sewnideas.com. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe,